The French and Indian War was the North American theater of a broader conflict between Britain and France known as the 7 Years' War. In the early 1750s, British settlers and investors were eager to expand westward to the Appalachian Mountains, while France sought to link its Canadian and Louisiana colonies and control the fur trade. The border between their territorial claims was poorly defined, and to assert control over the Ohio Valley, the French constructed a series of forts stretching south from Lake Erie. The British viewed these actions as a direct threat, escalating tensions and setting the stage for war. Another layer of the conflict was the competition for Native American alliances. The Iroquois Confederacy, strategically located between British and French territories, had long balanced both powers but began leaning toward the British by the 1750s due to increasing French encroachment. Meanwhile, tribes such as the Algonquin, Huron, and Abenaki supported the French, who treated them as trade partners rather than as people to conquer. The British aimed to claim and colonize land, while the French prioritized trade and missionary work, leading many tribes to view them as the lesser of two evils. In addition, deep-rooted ideological and religious rivalries between Catholic France and Protestant Britain, with each side seeing itself as defending its faith and values, further contributed to the rising tensions. The spark came when Virginia's royal governor sent a small expedition under the command of a 22-year-old George Washington to warn the French to leave the Ohio country. The French refused and Washington returned with a 160 Virginia militia and native allies to stake Britain's claim. On May 28, 1754, his party ambushed a small French scouting detachment in a wooded glen. The skirmish lasted about 15 minutes, leaving 10 Frenchmen dead, including their commander, Ensign Joseph de Jumonville. Following the encounter, Washington hastily retreated approximately 40 miles and constructed a crude stockade, which he named Fort Necessity. Enraged by the death of their commander, French troops and their native allies launched a retaliatory assault on July 3, 1754, swiftly overwhelming the British position. Washington was forced to surrender his entire command under humiliating terms that, unbeknownst to him, included a written admission of having assassinated Ensign Jumonville, even though some accounts suggest the wounded commander was killed by Washington's native ally, Tanna Harrison. This violent clash, later known as the Jumonville Affair, effectively ignited the French and Indian War, a conflict that soon expanded far beyond the Ohio frontier. In early 1755, Britain dispatched Major General Edward Braddock to North America with regular troops to expel the French. Braddock, a seasoned yet notoriously arrogant officer, devised an ambitious three-pronged campaign. One force, under his direct command, would strike the French stronghold at Fort Duquesne, a second would advance north toward Lake Champlain to capture Fort Carillon, later known as Ticonderoga, and a third would secure the Lake Ontario corridor anchored by Fort Niagara. Simultaneously, British colonials in Nova Scotia targeted French positions in Acadia. Though bold in scope, the plan suffered from poor coordination, and Braddock struggled to gain support from native tribes and even some colonial assemblies. Braddock's own expedition to Fort Duquesne met a disastrous fate. After carving a road through the wilderness, his 1,400-man force was ambushed on July 9, 1755 near the Monongahela River by a smaller French and native force. Ill-suited for forest combat, the British fell into chaos under deadly fire, and Braddock was mortally wounded while trying to rally his troops. Nearly 1,000 were killed or wounded, while French and native casualties were minimal. George Washington, serving as a volunteer aide, narrowly escaped harm and witnessed firsthand the power of indigenous tactics. The defeat left the frontier exposed and emboldened France and its allies. Elsewhere in 1755, British fortunes were mixed. In the north, Sir William Johnson's provincials halted a French advance at Lake George, winning a minor battle and constructing Fort William Henry. To the east, British forces captured Fort Beausejour in Acadia and expelled about 11,000 French Acadians from Nova Scotia. Yet despite these gains, the British failed to take Fort Duquesne, and French control over the Ohio Valley persisted. A fragile stalemate emerged as both sides prepared for broader conflict. In May 1756, nearly 2 years after Washington's initial skirmish, Britain and France formally declared war, escalating the struggle into a global confrontation. The Marquis de Montcalm, a capable French general, arrived in 1756 to take command of French forces in Canada. Although the French had fewer troops than the British, they benefited from interior lines and strong alliances with indigenous nations. Leveraging these advantages, they besieged and captured Fort Oswego, cutting off a potential British invasion route into Canada. In August 1757, Montcalm concentrated his forces against Fort William Henry. After a week-long siege, the fort fell. Aware that he was outnumbered in the long term, Montcalm offered the British garrison honorable terms of surrender. They could march away with their arms. However, his First Nations allies, angered by being denied the spoils of victory and acting according to their own war customs, attacked the withdrawing British column. The resulting massacre was sensationalized in colonial newspapers, stoking British outrage. By late 1757, the French and their indigenous allies controlled the Ohio Valley and the Great Lakes, had driven the British from the Champlain route, and fortified a defensive line along the St. Lawrence River. Meanwhile, the British war effort was weakened by internal disputes and poor leadership. Raids by French-allied indigenous war parties devastated frontier settlements in Pennsylvania, Virginia, and New England. British settlers along the frontiers lived in constant fear of sudden attacks, and the term French and Indian War became synonymous with a brutal struggle for survival in the wilderness. In 1757, Britain's war strategy underwent a decisive shift under the leadership of William Pitt the Elder. Convinced that victory in North America was vital to the future of the British Empire, Pitt dramatically expanded support for the campaign, deploying thousands of additional troops, appointing talented officers, and securing generous funding from Parliament. He also gained colonial cooperation by pledging reimbursement for locally raised regiments. Personally engaged in strategic planning, Pitt leveraged Britain's naval superiority to disrupt French supply lines. In 1758, the British launched several major offensives. In July, General Geoffrey Amherst captured Louisbourg after a hard-fought siege, securing control of the entrance to the St. Lawrence River and cutting off French Canada from Atlantic reinforcements. The victory was strategically significant. With the Royal Navy now dominating the seas, British and colonial forces were emboldened to press further into French territory. In the Pennsylvania backcountry, Brigadier General John Forbes led a methodical march on Fort Duquesne. Learning from Braddock's fate, Forbes advanced cautiously, constructing roads and forts to secure his supply line. By November 1758, the French garrison, cut off and outnumbered, destroyed their fortifications and withdrew just before Forbes arrived. British troops occupied the ruins and renamed the site Pittsburgh in honor of William Pitt. The long-sought control of the Ohio River confluence was thus achieved without another pitched battle. Britain's indigenous allies, including the Ohio Iroquois and Cherokee, were pleased, and the once hostile Pennsylvania frontier fell quiet as French influence receded westward. Meanwhile, in July 1758, British forces suffered a bloody setback at Fort Carillon, Ticonderoga. General James Abercrombie's overconfident assault on Montcalm's well-fortified lines ended in disaster, with more than 1,600 British casualties. Montcalm's brilliant defense marked France's final major victory in North America. Yet even this could not reverse the broader momentum. British numerical and material superiority was beginning to show. In August, a colonial force under Lieutenant Colonel Bradstreet captured Fort Frontenac, a vital French supply post on Lake Ontario, further isolating France's western forts. Bit by bit, the French grip on the continent was loosening. By 1759, British campaigns had intensified, earning the year the title Annus Mirabilis, the Miracle Year. In North America, 3 major offensives targeted Quebec and the remaining French strongholds in the west. In July, British forces under General John Prideaux and Sir William Johnson captured Fort Niagara, severing French connections to the Ohio Valley and Great Lakes. Around the same time, General Geoffrey Amherst advanced along the Lake Champlain route, prompting the French to destroy and abandon Fort Carillon, later renamed Fort Ticonderoga by the British, and Fort St. Frederick, Crown Point, without resistance. These victories further reduced the French perimeter, leaving only Quebec and Montreal under their control. In the summer of 1759, General James Wolfe led a daring expedition up the St. Lawrence River to attack Quebec City. After weeks of stalemate, Wolfe secretly landed troops west of the city and deployed them on the Plains of Abraham. On September 13th, his forces met Montcalm's French army in a brief but decisive battle. British volleys shattered French ranks, and both Wolfe and Montcalm were mortally wounded. Quebec surrendered 5 days later, sealing Britain's victory and marking the collapse of French power in Canada. This sensational victory made Wolfe a martyred hero in Britain. Although Quebec had fallen, the war in North America was not yet over. The French still held Montreal and rallied for a counteroffensive. In April 1760, the Chevalier de Lévis, Montcalm's successor, led a French army that re-engaged the British outside Quebec at the Battle of Saint Foy. This time, the French won a bloody victory and laid siege to the city, hoping to reclaim it. The British garrison, now under the command of James Murray, teetered on the brink of collapse as supplies dwindled. However, Royal Navy ships arrived in May with reinforcements, forcing Lévis to abandon the siege and retreat to Montreal. It was France's final gamble in Canada. That summer, the British prepared a 3-pronged advance on Montreal to finish the conquest of New France. General Amherst marched from the south via Lake Champlain, Colonel William Haviland came from Fort Crown Point, and General Murray ascended the St. Lawrence from Quebec. Facing invasion from multiple directions and hopelessly outnumbered, the French governor Vaudreuil surrendered Montreal on September 8, 1760 without a fight. With Montreal's fall, all of Canada was now in British hands. The war, however, continued globally until 1763. While the fighting in North America had largely ended with the fall of Quebec and Montreal, the broader 7 Years' War raged on across Europe, the Caribbean, and Asia. Spain entered the war in 1761 to support France, prompting Britain to launch successful campaigns against Spanish colonies, including the capture of Havana and Manila. By late 1762, exhaustion on all sides led to peace negotiations, culminating in the Treaty of Paris of 1763. The treaty's terms confirmed Britain's dominance in North America. France ceded Canada and all territories east of the Mississippi River to Britain, while transferring Louisiana west of the Mississippi to Spain as compensation for its losses. Spain, in turn, gave up Florida to Britain, securing British control over nearly all of eastern North America. For British colonists, the removal of France as a continental rival marked a dramatic shift. The threat of French-backed indigenous raids vanished, and the frontier opened for expansion. Feeling betrayed by the peace terms, indigenous nations led by Ottawa Chief Pontiac rose in rebellion in 1763. Although the British eventually suppressed the uprising, the shock prompted the Proclamation of 1763, which forbade American colonists from settling west of the Appalachians. Intended as a buffer to protect native lands, the measure enraged land-hungry colonists. Meanwhile, the enormous cost of the war led Parliament to impose new taxes and trade regulations on the colonies to recover expenses. Colonists who had fought and sacrificed during the war viewed these measures as unjust taxation, setting the stage for the American Revolution. The war also left a deep imprint on American identity, serving as a proving ground for future revolutionary leaders like George Washington and Daniel Boone, and fostering early intercolonial cooperation. Symbols such as Benjamin Franklin's Join, or Die Cartoon, originally a call for unity against France, would later be repurposed in the struggle against Britain. France's defeat, ironically, paved the way for its later support of the American colonies, which proved decisive in securing their independence. For French Canadians, the war brought a change in sovereignty but not in cultural identity. Though now British subjects, they retained their language and religion, rights later protected by the Quebec Act of 1774. Meanwhile, Acadian French expelled during the war formed diaspora communities in Louisiana, preserving their heritage as Cajuns. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deeper look into the French and Indian War, a conflict that reshaped North America, ignited colonial tensions, and set the stage for American independence, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you're first to know when we explore more pivotal moments in history. See you next time.